So we're on to step number 3 for the fast track to fabulous. Now step number 3 is all about evolving. So we've evolved by managing our emotions, and now we're going to evolve by breaking our unhelpful habits. If we think about our neural pathways in our brain, they're almost like an old record where that song is played over and over again. Now, like the old records, if you put a scratch in that record, the same song can never be played again. So that's what we need to do when we break our habits. We need to put a scratch in the record so that we can't play that same song again. How do we do this? We do this with a technique called pattern interrupts, because we're interrupting a pattern. Now, one of the very first things that we can do is basically to pause. Quite often people think that they have to always react to something, that when something happens they have to have an immediate response. You don't have to have a response. You can just stop for a second. You can press the pause button on your life and do nothing. That's okay to do that. So a very good way of pausing is by just doing a deep breathing. I know that when I need to pause and I want to press the pause button on my life, I just stop and do some deep breathing. So 10 deep breaths is a wonderful, wonderful way just to pause, just to stop. So if you're finding yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in, just stop for a moment, breathe, get your breath back, and just relax and just really still the mind. So what I'd like you to do now is go to your workbook, and under the pause exercise, I want you to think about those moments in your day when you perhaps need to press that pause button. It could be at the time when the kids are just getting under your skin, and rather than reacting or responding, you need to just stop for a moment and just breathe. Because what you don't want to be doing is yelling or raising your voice. You want to be a role model. So perhaps rather than thinking about what the best thing to do, it's basically just to do nothing, just to pause. The second way that we can interrupt a pattern is by postponing. So the first way was to pause. The second way was to postpone. This is a very good method when you don't need to do something right now. You can do it later on. So for instance, there was a time in my life where I would engage in binge eating. So what I would do is come home from work, I was absolutely exhausted and tired, and I would go to the pantry and get everything that I could and just start eating. What I needed to do was just postpone and say to myself, I don't need to eat that food right now. If I said to myself, don't do it, don't eat the food, I'd say, oh well, yes, I want to. So there'd be another part of me that'd say, no, I'm going to eat that food right now. But if I said to myself, okay, fine, the food's not going anywhere, just wait 10 minutes. Just give myself 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, if I really want to eat that food, the food's there, I can still eat it. So just wait 10 minutes, postpone the event. That way you're not denying yourself something. And what will happen in 10 minutes time is that you'll be in a completely different state. And you may not need to eat that food anymore. It's a very powerful technique. This could also be used when you want to react to something that somebody has said. Perhaps you say to yourself, look, I can tell them that right now when I'm feeling this incredible emotion inside me, or I can just wait for 30 minutes to pass, 40 minutes to pass, and then I'll have that conversation. And what often happens is that when you do have that conversation later on, it's far more effective, far more powerful, because the emotion has gone by that time, and you can then talk from your conscious mind in a very logical and analytical way, and you feel empowered when you do that. So they're two very, very effective power interrupts, the pause and postpone. The third one is one that I absolutely love. It's called the switch. Now, this technique has changed lives. It really, really has. What it's about is when you have a negative thought in your mind, what you need to do is first of all put a circuit breaker. So what we're going to do is put a circuit breaker to that thought by saying out aloud the word switch, or in your mind the word switch, and then we turn that negative thought into a positive thought that we believe is true. So this is not a thought that we don't believe is true. As an example, it could be that we're saying, I feel terrible, I can't fit into any of my clothes, I'm a big fat pig. Switch. I'm doing something about it. So we're not saying actually, I'm fantastic. I'm really happy about myself. I love the way that I look. We're not saying that yet. That's an affirmation, and we can do that later on in the process. But right now, we just need to switch those negative thoughts into positive thoughts. What will happen is this. First of all, you become very mindful about all the thoughts that are going on in your head. So you take them out of your subconscious mind into your conscious awareness. You force the change, keep forcing the change, forcing the change, forcing the change, and then those thoughts come back into your subconscious mind automatically. What will happen over time is that you will have less and less thoughts to switch because you will automatically be thinking that way. So with the way that I think, because I've been doing this technique for so long now, I automatically switch. With every single thought that I have, I switch. Every single negative thought that comes into my mind, it doesn't even stay there for a millisecond because it switches to a positive one. There's no thought that can't be switched. So what I need you to do with this exercise is to start becoming very mindful of your thought patterns. So in the beginning, you need to write them down. Write down your negative thoughts. This is not a journal, so this is not about writing what happened in the day and why you have the negative thought and so on. This is just the sentence that you say. Whatever that sentence is, I want you to say the sentence, write it down, switch it, and switch it to a positive thought that you believe is absolutely true. The next method that we can use to interrupt our patterns is by a technique that we call scrambling. So what we do is we scramble the strategy. Let me explain this further. We all have these subconscious strategies. There's a certain step. We consciously don't know what those steps are, but if we sit down and break it down, there's a step. There's a thought, there's a feeling, there's an action. So what we need to do is scramble that pattern. And then when we scramble that pattern, it doesn't feel quite right. So the way that we scramble patterns is by doing something odd, by breaking up the pattern in such a way that we do something very odd in the middle. So this technique was used, I used this technique on myself when I had this unhelpful pattern, which was that every time I sat down to work on the computer, I felt that I had to have something by the keyboard side to put into my mouth. So I needed to eat something at the same time that I was on the computer. So I wasn't hungry, I didn't need to eat, but it was like, okay, sit down, especially if it was a tedious task, something like completing your tax or something like that. Almost felt like I needed something to eat at the same time. So what I did was I broke down those steps in terms of exactly what I did and put something completely different in the middle of those steps. So something very odd, like instead of getting something to eat, I would do 10 push-ups instead. And although this sounds really odd, it actually scrambles the technique. And you don't do that anymore. You become very aware of what your habits are and you scramble them so that you can't get those habits back. This is a technique that I use with my clients, and it's obviously far easier for me to do on you than you to use yourself. But I thought it'd be very useful. Another pattern interrupt is the way that we carry our bodies. So if I'm having a particularly tiring day and I'm very exhausted, what I tend to do is get up and just swing my body and stretch as far as I could go, raise my voice, and automatically I feel different. The energy has changed. As an example, when you're feeling down, there's a certain way that you carry your body. There's a certain way that you're looking. There's a certain way that you're carrying your shoulders. There's a certain way that you're carrying in terms of what your posture's like, the way that you're speaking and so on. I mean, you can call someone on the phone and you immediately know whether they feel well or not just by the way they answer the phone. It's the same with you. If you fake it, you will make it. In other words, if you carry your body differently, you will feel differently. So if you were to this very moment say something out aloud, yell it, scream it, get up, stretch your body right now, you'll feel different. You'll awaken. So I'd like you to do this regularly through this series actually, is I'd like you to get up and say something out aloud, revitalize yourself, give yourself some energy, smile, and you'll feel completely different. It will change you, I promise you. It's almost like when you're not feeling well and somebody pops in, a visitor, an unexpected visitor, and all of a sudden you're expected to feel better, and so you do. You say, "Hi, how are you?" Even though a moment ago you were feeling quite ordinary, and all of a sudden you've forgotten that you don't feel so well. So that's what actually happens, is that when you change the way you speak, when you change the way that you carry your body, when you change your movements, you do feel better. So when you're feeling tired, when you're feeling fatigued, the worst thing that you can do is just allow that to consume you. What you need to do is just break that state and do something completely different. Do a jog, do a skip, do some squats, whatever it is that you need to do to give yourself some energy. Raise your voice, sing. Whatever it is that you have to do it. Change your state. You're in control. So now that you know all the different ways that we've interrupted our patterns and broken our habits, what we need to do is fill that gap. We need to create an empowering alternative. So we've taken one habit away and we need to replace it with another habit. We can't just take a habit away and leave a gap there. So what do we do instead? So as an example, I gave you the example where I used to come home from work, and the first thing that I would do is, go straight into the kitchen and start taking whatever it was out of the cupboard. Usually I would take dry biscuits and dips and cheeses and have my own personal party before I even began dinner. Perhaps even a glass of wine, whatever it was that I needed to unwind for the day. As you can imagine, lots and lots and lots of calories. By the time dinner was ready, I wasn't even hungry. So this is not an unusual story. I know that this is a story that's quite common for a lot of you. So what we need to do is create an empowering alternative. So what did I do instead? So what I would do instead was that I would first of all use a different entrance when I would get home. Instead of getting through the entrance which took me directly through the kitchen, so that was my first point of call, I would use another entrance, go upstairs, get changed, get relaxed, wear my comfy clothes, and then get straight downstairs to get dinner organised. Have some water, big glass of icy cold water, so that became my new habit. So you need to create brand new habits to replace those ones. It could be that after dinner you're used to going and treating yourself with an ice cream or a chocolate bar when really you don't need it. You don't need to eat at that time of night. So what can you do instead? Perhaps a lovely, beautiful cup of tea, herbal tea, that's just delicious and warming. Perhaps that's your new habit. I don't know, but you do. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go to your workbook, which is titled, the exercise that is titled Empowering Alternatives, and I want you to write, what will you do instead? What will you do instead of the habit you've just broken? Specifically, what will you do instead? Some clients have said to me that they've gone into a special room and they've sat there for a moment or two and just gathered their thoughts. It could be that you've gone for a walk instead. That's also an empowering alternative. Rather than come home and have a little feast before dinner, you could go for a quick walk, a brisk walk. So you think of an empowering alternative that's realistic for you, that you can actually do. So do that now. Pause the audio and go and do that now.